when you live life in a way where you aren't consciously putting your infinite value at the very top of your value system, you can become your own worst judge in life. We already receive a huge amount of judgment from our outer world, from especially communicated via these devices. But if you are not securely anchored in an identity of being of infinite worth, then you can internalize these judgments, and that judge that is a representation of material values that are found in the outer world, they become part of your inner experience, and they can be quite unrelenting in their frequency and intensity. Now, whenever you receive like posts on these phones, and you have these pictures or these stories of people's ideal lives and living these lives with high materialistic standards, we are receiving critique in a way. That's a message going, why aren't you like this? This is how you should be, and you're not like this, so what's wrong with you? That's how we often internalize the messages that we receive from these phones. And a lot of the communication we receive from these phones, especially via social media, are actually not even reflections of reality at all. They're filtered, they're the best of, but portrayed as just regular life for such individuals that put these sorts of posts onto their phones. But yeah, even more broadly, we are always there's always an implicit sort of judgment that we get through these phones, and through, of course, other people in our lives, through face-to-face communication and whatnot. And yeah, without understanding your true worth, you can internalize these judgments, and it can be very, very it can break you down, especially in regards to having it as an imbalance phenomena, this internal judgment of oneself. Now, judgment's always going to be there, though, because we are value constructed beings. So there's always going to be a judge, and that judge's purpose is really to make you aware of when you're off the path towards the values in which you are trying to fulfill. If there's values, there's going to be a judge. They're one of the same sort of structure. They exist complementary, really. A value needs a judge, because a value is something that you must fulfill and strive for. And without having a judge there to keep you in check, then obviously the lack of fulfillment of these values, well, it basically means they're not values at all. So the judge is always going to be there. Now, it's key to understand that if you are a person who suffers from immense self-judgment and internalizes a lot of judgment they receive from the environment around them, then that means you're actually being judged for not seeing yourself properly. The majority of that negative emotion, which we interpret as like judging ourselves, because if we have self-judging thoughts, it's always going to be met with emotional contraction. In reflection of previous videos, we can see actually, no, that is your emotions, your nature saying you're wrong in your interpretation, because you are of infinite worth, and that's all your emotions know. So when you judge yourself based on materialistic measures in life, your emotions are always going to be like, mate, you are coming completely from the wrong place. And in a sense, they're judging you. This emotional negativity comes from, getting this fundamental presupposition of what you are wrong. So a lot of the judgment you receive is actually because you are believing in self-lack. And that's causing a lot of this judgment, these internal judgments to run crazy within you without any control. But once you understand that a lot of the emotional contraction that's associated with this is a sign from the true, from the center of truth within you, that's when you can start to calm this inner judge. That is when you actually start a process of forgiveness, essentially, because you start to understand a lot of this contraction. These thoughts are coming from belief structures of lack within you, and that's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. That's out of line with the truth of reality. And your emotions, being the beacon of truth that they are, will signal misalignment, that you are currently on a pathway it's just not where you should be. You're totally off the path of your innate value, and therefore unfolding your full potential. So understanding that allows you to forgive. Understanding that allows you to forgive yourself for seeing yourself out of alignment with the truth. So that's a forgiveness process. And that's where this judge then will start to offer forgiveness as well. And the judge then becomes balanced with forgiveness. So when you start to then consciously live a life where you're putting your infinite worth at the top of your hierarchy, and you're trying to unfold trying to unfold a life of ultimate betterment for the greater structure of life around you, where you're trying to be your best self by sacrificing selflessly towards the world around you in order to make life better for as many people as possible. When you're doing that, that's when your emotional life becomes so much more balanced, much more calm, and much more, you're imbued with an intense sense of meaning. Because you're still going to receive judgment, inner judgment, because remember, we're driven by values, and we're still trying to strive towards those values of universal betterment for life itself. So the judge is still going to be there, but it's going to arise when you are striving for great things but are making honest mistakes. When you're slightly going off path, that emotional judge will still be there and be like, well, actually, you're starting to perceive things in a way which is too aligned with materialistic falsity, and that's where you can interpret those emotions properly and accurately, and put yourself back on the right path. And that's where you'll be met with emotions of forgiveness for making such honest mistakes, because mistakes are essential in the pathway towards the best you can be. So it's so important to as one of the initial processes in building the best life you possibly can, you need to forgive yourself for seeing yourself out of alignment with the truth of your infinite worth. That is a very key initial thing to get right. And a way in which we can facilitate this initial process is to embody gratitude, is to identify solidly with the gratitude which is at the base of your natural beingness anyway, because that gratitude is a very raw, natural form of self-love. So when I say gratitude, I'm of course saying you need to be thankful. You need to be appreciative for the fact that so much sacrifice has already occurred in that 3.9 billion year old line of possibility that is within you as the memory of life itself. So that gratitude puts you in a position where you can genuinely start loving yourself the way your whole nature already does. You simply start living in alignment with the emotional truth that resides within you. You can either walk in alignment with it, or you can try and walk against it. I know what I'd rather do, that's for sure. So gratitude will help this process of forgiveness. So in order to facilitate this process of gratitude that we must embody if we are to honor the infinite value of ourselves, it's a very good idea to be super aware of the reasons why you are of infinite value. And that's why I'm about to present 5 self-evident, indisputable reasons why you are of infinite value. And I will finish this video to focusing on the first reason, but then the following videos and blogs will discuss the next 4 reasons. And these are 5 very strong, self-evident and scientifically / philosophically backed arguments, which once you come to understand and wrap your head around, makes it very hard for one to not be grateful towards oneself. The first reason that the first self-evident, indisputable reason you are of infinite value is the fact that life is a self-valuing phenomena. Now I say this because all life is driven by 2 dominant biological laws or values. These 2 values are quite simply, and we all know this, simply that all life as an individual, like all the individuated bodies that make up life, all will act in ways that prioritize their own survival, prioritize the need to continue experiencing, the need to stay alive, obviously. That's the first biological value. And the second is more collective in its nature, and that is all creatures, all forms of life will act in ways, sacrificial ways, for the betterment of the greater structure that individual is a part. So greater structure meaning usually, of course, the species group that they belong to. Now, these 2 laws are often very overlooked in modern biology as to a source of reality that will allow us to see things with much more insight. In the way in which biology is studied these days, it's very materialistically done through a very materialistic approach to the world around us, which is great because that's how science is done. It's done through having an objective materialistic lens, but it's given us so much utility. It's made us, of course, extremely evolved in how we are as a species group. The way in which science has exponentially evolved us in many ways, especially in regards to material richness and being able to operate materialistically within the world. Science has been amazing in that regard. However, when you overlook the fact that life essentially boils down to being a self-value driven phenomena, if you overlook that, you overlook a lot of basically insights as to why things are the way they are, because we get a lot of answers to how things work when we look at it solely from an objective scientific lens, and that's great. Knowing how things work and how things function obviously is of huge utility, but that without being able to address questions as to why those two biological laws exist in the first place, it means you're never really going to go very deep in knowing the truth behind this phenomena of life that we are all directly an expression of. So when you look at these two values, and on face value, these values, these two biological laws, they don't seem very insightful, or they're of course significant, but it's very self-evident. It's like, yeah, okay, so what? Well, if you really think about it, these two laws make it very clear. And remember, every expression of life is structured internally by these laws, which means values is at the basis of everything in regards to expressions of life. When you really analyze this deeply from a position of thinking, well, if I'm of infinite worth, like, where does that come from? Why is that a truth that resides within all life? And we can see with these two biological values, they make it very clear that yes, life values itself infinitely. There's no way it can't. It operates based on two values that ensure that structure of self-value, another way of saying it, self-love, is fulfilled, or at least the striving for that fulfillment will never cease as long as those two values are present within all expressions of life. And what is quite amazing about these two biological laws is, in the moment life emerged, seemingly from the very structure of the universe itself, it already had this structure of values innately within it. So it's almost like the structure from which it arose from, whatever deeply ordered structures of the universe life arose from, that self-valuing shape of these values was already there. So I think that's we overlook that fact, and that, just sort of thinking about that in itself can be quite mind-boggling. So we can see here that life itself truly does love itself. Okay, and when I say love, it's obviously, I'm using that word love to express a type of love that is it's not easy to directly comprehend this type of love, because it's very deep within all expressions of life, and it can be understood and comprehended in very, very deep ways for sure. But that's where meditation is key in understanding the true nature of the self-love that is at your core. And this love, it's like I said, it's ancient. It's 3.9 billion years old at least, and it's unified in that it's at the center of all life, and therefore acts as the thing at the center of all life that unifies life. This self-love, it makes life an undivided whole structure. So as humans, when we think about love and we try and relate to what love means in our life, usually it's related to interpersonal relationships you have with others, say in romantic contexts, or of course in family, the relationships you have with close family and friends. It's all very love driven, absolutely. And the funny thing is, we pretty much all regard it as the most valuable thing in life, love, in whatever expression. And that love is very much a derivative of this more biological self-love that life has for itself. It's an outgrowth of it. It's the love that we talk about and relate to. If you break it all down, completely relates to the need for life itself to continue experiencing, to continue on a path of being alive, but striving towards an evolutionary pathway as well. But also, of course, when you think about acts of sacrifice, which all animals in some regard do, all creatures, all forms of life do for the betterment of the greater group that they are a part, that's where we can start to more relate to, okay, I can see how this love is innately within all expressions of life, because that act of sacrifice, when, let's say, if we relate it to human experience, a human who consciously sacrifices themselves and possibly meets their ultimate end in regards to their embodied life expression and dies, that is the ultimate expression of love a human can express. And that's why it's regarded as the most courageous, heroic act one can manifest. But we see that throughout the animal kingdom as well. So truly see that life itself loves itself. And even if you do suffer from, a lack of love towards yourself in life, you need to objectively see that life itself and the structure that you are a memory of, the life structure you're a memory of, only sees itself as being of value. And that's what your emotions only know, as we've talked about. So understand that there's no escaping the fact that you are an expression of life that innately loves itself. And you can either live yourself in line or out of line with that. And the way in which you form alignment with that is through gratitude, is through being super grateful, appreciative, thankful for all the sacrifice that went before you, that all that suffering, all that hardship of life itself, just constantly striving, facing the fear of death in an infinite many different ways. This line of life that has been traveling for 3.9 billion years, and now you've got you. That's all within you. And to simply be grateful for that is to start perceiving yourself and all life in line with the truth of life's own self-love for itself. So that's the first reason why it is extremely self-evident you are infinitely valuable.